This is chapter 15, which is about the heart. So the goals for this chapter are to learn about the structure and organization of the heart, which we'll also do in lab this week. To talk about the blood flow through the heart and how the heart gets its blood. The conduction system of the heart. So the conduction system is how the heart beats, what's stimulating it to beat. What an electrocardiogram is, basically the cardiac cycle and cardiac output. Okay, so when you look at the heart in general, okay, so the heart is in the thoracic cavity. It's slightly to the left in the chest, so it's more towards the left than centered. So when you say the pledge to the flag and you put your hand over your heart, remember it's not right in the middle, it's to the left, so that's accurate. Okay, now the layers of the heart. So the first thing, if you start from the outside and you go in, you're going to start with the pericardial sac. Now the pericardial sac has several layers. The outermost layer is the fibrous pericardium. Whoops, hold on guys, wait a minute, sorry. Let me get the pointer. Is the fibrous pericardium. So the fibrous pericardium is pretty tough. It's what you cut through to see the heart in the cat and the pig. Okay, now the serous pericardium lays right on top of the heart. It produces serous fluid. Serous fluid in this case is called pericardial fluid. The pericardial fluid, what it's going to do is it's going to reduce the friction so you don't feel your heart beating in your chest. So the serous pericardium has two layers, a parietal layer, a visceral layer. There's a space in between those two, which is called the pericardial cavity, and in that cavity is where we have the fluid. So we can review this. So the pericardial cavity, whoops, yeah, I'm good with this. The pericardial cavity is the space in between the visceral layer and the parietal layer, and that's where we're going to find the fluid. Okay, now, the wall of the heart has three different layers. So it has epicardium, okay, and the epicardium is actually the same as the visceral pericardium. Okay, it has a myocardium. So the myocardium is this thick wall of muscle. And then it has an inner layer, which is called the endocardium. And the endocardium is actually what the blood is going to touch in the heart. Okay, now, the pericardium and the heart wall. So if we look at this up close, you can kind of see. So they took this little area right here and they blew it up. So here's the fibrous pericardium. So that's the thick layer. Okay, and right next to it is going to be the parietal layer. Then that blue line is the pericardial cavity with the fluid, and then the visceral layer. Okay, so the visceral pericardium is the same as the epicardium. Okay, so they just have two different names depending on what you're talking about. So either one is right. Okay, now the heart muscle wall is really thick. Okay, it's very thick, very tough, very strong. Okay, so that's the myocardium. So myo is the muscle. That makes sense, right? Okay, and then the endocardium is the inner layer. If you took some of the myocardium out and looked at it really, really up close with a high-power microscope, okay, this is going to be what it looks like. So it's muscle, okay, and it's striated. So you see the striations. Okay, so we say striated. Okay, it has a nucleus. The cells have nucleus. Okay, now what makes it different from skeletal muscle is that the muscle fibers don't run strictly parallel to each other. They're branched. Okay, so you can see the branching. Okay, and another thing is that the cells, the cardiac muscle cells, are connected with these things called intercalated discs. So intercalated discs, you can see them on this picture right here. It's this dark line right here. So the intercalated discs are just connections between the cells. And really what it does is it allows the heart muscle to beat as a unit. So you're going to want the chambers to beat together. You don't want it to be beating at all different times. So the intercalated discs are going to allow the chambers to beat uniformly at the same, kind of like at the same time. Okay, now, when you start to look at the anatomy of the heart, you're going to see that there are 4 chambers. So the top 2 chambers are called the atria, and atrium is singular. And you can think of those as receiving chambers. So when the blood comes to the heart, the atria are the first place that the blood goes. So if you look at this, so here's one atrium, and here's the other atrium. Okay, so here's the left side, and here's the right side. Okay, so you got to think of it being in your patient. Okay, now the ventricles are the bottom 2 chambers. Okay, and they're the pumping chambers. So here's the left ventricle, okay, and here's the right ventricle. Okay, so chambers. Okay, now the valves, there are 4 valves. So 4 valves. Oops, that's beautiful. 4 valves. So 2 valves are called atrioventricular valves, and 2 valves are called semilunar valves. The atrioventricular valves are going to be the valves that are between the atria and the ventricles. Okay, so they're right in here. I tried to make them red. Okay, so they're going to control the flow of blood between the atria and the ventricles. So they're on the right and left sides. Okay, so they have a couple different names, so you can either call them the right and left atrioventricular valve or right and left AV valve, or they have like old school names. So the one on the right is the tricuspid valve, and the one on the left is the bicuspid valve. Another name for the bicuspid valve is the mitral valve. Now, we're going to look at heart models, and we're going to dissect a heart in lab, so you'll be able to see all of this and put your hands on it. It'll make it easier, I think. Okay, so I remember right has RI, okay, and tri has RI in it. So the right side is the tricuspid, or you could also call it the right AV valve, and then the left one is the bicuspid. Okay, so those are the AV valves. The other 2 valves are semilunar valves. The semilunar valves are between the ventricles, okay, and some of the great vessels. Okay, so here is one semilunar valve, and that semilunar valve is called the pulmonary valve. The pulmonary valve is going to be between the right ventricle and the pulmonary trunk. Okay, so you haven't learned all the parts yet, but there's the pulmonary valve. Okay, now the other semilunar valve is between the left ventricle and the aorta, and it's called the aortic valve. Whoops, I crossed it out instead of making it circled. So aortic valve, and then pulmonary valve. I wish that I could write with this. I can't write with the mouse very well. Okay, so that's that part. Okay, now when we look at the major vessels of the heart, there's a lot on this picture, so I'm just going to circle some of it. So when you look at it, so this is an anterior view. Okay, and as you can see, the heart, it's sitting kind of tilted to the left. It's not straight up and down. It's not perfectly centered. Okay, so let's start with the aorta. Okay, so the aorta is an artery. Okay, arteries always carry blood away from the heart. So this big vessel right here, okay, this one, this is the aorta. Okay, so the aorta is going to carry oxygenated blood out through to the heart. Okay, now over here are 2 veins. Okay, the top vein is called the superior vena cava, and the bottom vein is called the inferior vena cava. Okay, these 2 things, so veins always bring blood back to the heart. Whoops, this is beautiful. Veins bring blood back to the heart. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. The superior vena cava is a major vein that's going to bring all the blood from above your heart back to your heart. The inferior vena cava is going to bring blood from below the heart back to the heart. So pretty much you could draw an arrow. This is going this way, this is going this way. Okay, so the blood comes from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, and it dumps into the right atrium. Okay, from there, it's going to go to the left, the right ventricle. Okay, from the right ventricle, the blood is going to go out this trunk, which is called the pulmonary trunk. It's a big artery, and it's going to take the blood to the lungs. Okay, so there's pulmonary trunk. Okay, the blood's going to go to the lungs. When it comes back from the lungs, it's going to enter these pulmonary veins. Okay, so here's the main major vessels. Okay, so superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, aorta. Okay, and there are other parts of the aorta, which don't have to talk about right this minute. Pulmonary trunk, and then pulmonary veins are down here. And there's pulmonary veins on both sides. So pulmonary veins. When you see it on a model, it'll make things easier for you.